Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group. There's a couple things that are just absolutely going nuts around the world right now. And humor is the only thing we got that's a defense mechanism for this. And I've got Adam Goodman. He is with Ballard Partners. He's on the host of the 13th and Park as my special guest today. Welcome, Adam. How are you today?
It's so great to be with you. And I can't wait to get to the humor part because, as you said, we need a lot more of that.
I'll tell you, you can't buy this kind of entertainment around here. And I have to give you a shout out to Joe, our joint friend. And you have had some phenomenal guests. Tell us a little bit about Ballard and Partners and your show, 13th and Park. This is huge.
Well, Ballard Partners is a government affairs firm started by Brian Ballard. Came out of Florida, where they are either the top or one of the top two government affairs firms there. And then, Brian had and has a very long relationship with the former president. And so when Donald Trump suddenly, out of nowhere, became president of the United States, Brian was one of the few people that had meaningful dealings with the president, primarily in Florida, and decided to open up a Washington shop. So now we are not just in Florida and Washington. We opened up in outside of Hollywood recently, in LA. We've got a couple different offices around the world. So this is all kind of cool. But these are all government affairs people, Stu. I'm like the creative guy. So I almost feel like I'm in the entertainment committee that was brought into this shop of serious people to try to help clients with messaging and important messaging to and well beyond Capitol Hill.
Censorship is happening big time. People don't like me because I'm a legend in my own mind, Adam. and Google doesn't like somebody that's smarter than themselves. And I want to share this clip with you. This was absolutely a phenomenal clip I found on your X, and your X channel is Adam Goodman 2. Is that correct?
Adam Goodman 3. I don't know who 2 is, but I wish that person would
go. I will have that changed right now. So it's Adam Goodman 3. My bad. Okay. So here we go. Let's take a look at this one. This was a great walkout
as comedian Jerry Seinfeld began his commencement speech.
What I need to tell you as a comedian, do not lose your sense of humor. You can have no idea at this point in your life how much you are going to need it to get through.
Your thoughts on, even in the midst of someone giving a positive message, students are taking that opportunity?
Well, first of all, it was a great speech. Humor is a very difficult thing to bridge the generations and the changes in the world. And I don't know how he's done it, but Jerry Seinfeld, even to this moment, still is one of the best ever. His bigger point was tolerance. The young generations are all into trying to be careful of others' feelings and be tolerant. But yet these disruptions and these protests are showing anything but tolerance or a drive for the truth.
Wasn't that great? You were phenomenal. So, I'm jealous.
I'm just teeing off of Jerry Seinfeld. Anytime I can attach myself to someone with that kind of talent, I'm going to look half okay. But think about this, Stu. I mean, Jerry Seinfeld's been around for more than a generation. I just actually, just to confessions, right? I re-binged the entire Seinfeld, program series, and it is phenomenal at this moment. I mean, how much comedy? How much material? How much?
You and I could sit back and start just going into the soup Nazi, no soup for you. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, that is cross conversational, that just gets rid of all boundaries.
But he had a serious message for these students that day, and of course, what preceded that was a protest. Some students walked out, right? They turned their back on Jerry Seinfeld, for heaven's sake. I mean, if you're not ready to laugh at Jerry Seinfeld, you're not ready to laugh at anything. But his message probably both shocked and motivated them. It shocked them that, you're about to graduate into this very, very challenging world. And I'm not sure you're laughing about it. A lot of students, you're kind of concerned about it. But on the other hand, he had a serious message, which is, look, I love where your heart is here, but think about what you're practically saying and what you're practically doing and not doing. It's showing a kind of intolerance that is not what you're preaching, and I think that was very valuable.
And it is Adam Goldman 3. Is that correct?
Adam Goodman 3, right?
Okay, just making sure. Okay, so let's go to this next clip, and I really love this clip as well too. So let's take a look at this one.
Bidenomics is working.
What are your thoughts on Biden's message?
There's a world of difference between macroeconomics, which is the preserve of economists and commentators, and microeconomics, which is what we all experience around the kitchen table. That's where it's not feeling good. And the message should really be, look, we had a real challenge years ago because of COVID. We came out of it. We survived it. We're on the comeback trail. We're not where we need to be yet, but there are signs that we're about to cross over that mountain pass into greener pastures, as opposed to what the president is saying is, look how well I've done. And that just isn't selling.
Guess what? Bidenomics is working.
Right.
You know, it's
wow.
we have a lot of very, very smart people in public life who do a lot of very, very unintelligent things. Okay, so look,
Hey, you would describe me.
I mean, the president obviously wants to present a case that his 4 years have been successful or on the road to being successful. But
Right.
what he and so many others do, Stu, is they make claims they can't possibly, with a straight eye, kind of reinforce. And the claim that Bidenomics is working, you ask most people who are experiencing what is I refer to as the squeeze, right? It's the
Right.
fact that wages aren't going up as fast as the cost of living. They're not happy about it. They're not feeling good about the economy, and they don't want to be told by the president that they
No.
should be feeling good, and it's all somehow working. It's what happened, Stu, in 2016 when Donald Trump, given no chance to win
Right.
against Hillary Clinton, he won, and the secret of that campaign, especially in the Midwest, was
Right.
a lot of Americans were hurting economically around the
Right.
kitchen table, and no one seemed to be picking that up. The media wasn't picking that up. Donald
Right.
Trump did, and he took that all the way to the White House.
What do you think about the Bronx? That was an amazing event this past week.
It's always amazing with the president. Yes, it's always amazing and unpredictable when you have the president, the former president, in play, right? And
Right.
That was no surprise. I mean, we have debates coming up, and the debates are going to be in a studio with no audience. When Donald Trump has an audience, even if they're not 100%
Right.
with him, he loves that. He feeds off of that. And of course, as a former, we'll call him broadcaster, someone that really understands television, and one thing in particular, Stu,
Right.
audience. What are the ratings? How many people are watching and listening? He really understands that better than anybody else I think I've ever met in the world of politics.
Yeah.
That's an audience, and he likes to play to it. And as long as they're there and they're in numbers, even if they're
He's
raising their
good at
voice
it.
sometimes, he's all in.
Man, I loved it when he was at the podium and he says, "This thing's leaning to the left. It keeps leaning to the left." I mean, he is loving, hating. He does mean tweets, but he also had absolutely no wars. He had the Abraham Accord.
There should be a commandment in politics. And coming from the media side, you know, as
Yeah.
I do, my commandment would be, thou shalt not bore. Thou shalt not bore. Well, Donald Trump never bores, right? He's
Oh, no.
always entertaining, even if entertainment is read as infuriating, hair on fire, all that stuff. But you listen to him. And
Right.
a lot of people who think they're very smart and they have all these things to offer that are not great communicators, that don't have presence, they just
Yeah.
can't understand why people, president, maybe soon to be a president again, he understands what it takes to get people not only to listen and be motivated by it, but to
Right. You know, as we sit back, I'm writing a thing that I'm meeting with Senator Cruz tomorrow
uh,
at one of my favorite places with Genevieve Collins for the Americans for Prosperity in Dallas, and she was a guest on your show.
she was, and she is one of the top 10 all-time shows in terms of audience. She was fantastic. You talk about, if you're looking
Isn't that great?
if you're looking for someone that represents the future in a way that you love to believe in, Jennifer
Right.
Collins is that. She is smart. She's great on her feet. She's got a message that's
Right.
really relevant and timely and important. And you can tell she's going somewhere in a nice way, and that others are going to follow her. She's kind of got that sense of presence where you want to be a part of it wherever
Yep.
that leads.
The whole organization of Americans for Prosperity is a great organization trying to get out there and eliminate energy poverty for everyone and energy and really taking the charge on this. And so I'm just very grateful for my time being able to visit with them and also with the other CEOs and the event that they have, getting our politicians in a room with energy CEOs. What a great thing to have happen.
Yeah, and the energy CEOs, I mean, they've had a lot they've had to deal with in recent years as we've gone through, we'll call it the great debate,
Right.
between, the energy that we grew up with and have and that still depend on greatly, and those that are pushing, the envelope on the alternative energies and other kinds of energies to come. And it would, what really bothers, I'm sure these CEOs, and it sure bothers you and I'm sure, is it's an either or proposition as presented. Well, you have to pick A or you
Right.
pick B. It should be A and B. A is something we depend on right now. It's the energy to become energy independent in this world is
Right.
a huge national security and economic security buttress to America. Gotta have
Right.
that, right? That
Right.
doesn't mean we don't do everything we can to start developing in parallel to that B, but not that we throw A out, throw the baby out with the bathwater,
Oh
right?
yeah.
To go to B. And yet a lot of the CEOs of major energy companies have to
Right.
confront this kind of black and white, one way or the highway kind of approach that a lot of the people feel should be the
Right.
future of energy, and it's really unfair.
One of the fun things about being a podcast host is being able to interview other CEOs of other great companies. And like Chris Wright is one of my all-time heroes. Chris Wright he really changed how I formulated the Energy News Beat podcast. And that was by, going after the elimination of energy poverty.
Mhm.
And it's about eliminating energy poverty. Let's take New York. Yeah, please take New York. That was a Ronnie Day. Please take New York.
Right.
Texas is one half the price of electricity we use.
Mhm.
Wind, coal, solar. We use nuclear. We don't care. We want to use it all.
Mhm.
And we still had 1 million Texans without power yesterday,
Right.
just because of the grid instability. We need to be spending our money on grid stability and hardening our facilities rather than some of this other stuff that we're spending it on. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we lost you there.
Oh, sorry.
You're right in the middle of the best point of the show, and you froze. Anyway.
I have that effect on people. And so what do you see? Should we take the 50 states?
Mhm.
Let's break the 50 states apart
Mhm.
and say, okay, New York, no fossil fuel for you. No fossil for you. Let's pull a Seinfeld on New York. No fossil fuels for you. No diesel, no gasoline, no nothing. See how well you do. Should we try that experiment?
Yeah, it drives you nuts, right? When you confront someone with the truth they don't want to acknowledge exists because it conflicts with their narrative and their point of
Right.
view, and that would be one of many. So, yeah, I think the grid, the uncertainty of the grid or the instability of the grid,
Right.
should concern everybody, right? Because you can have energy security, independence rather, but not energy security if you
Right.
don't have a dependability of energy coming in. But I want you to know I'm working on an effort right now. Talk about the
Okay.
states in Washington State, and that was a state that the governor Jay Inslee has been an unabashed climate change advocate to the point where he's pushing laws and remedies that are really punishing consumers. And one of those
Yep.
is what's referred to as the carbon tax, where
Oh,
where on a price of a gallon of gas, they've tacked on not just the normal state tax, they've tacked on a carbon tax, and they would say they're using that to invest it in green programs to reduce their footprint. When he was confronted, the governor recently, about, well, how successful have you been in these green programs and reducing the carbon footprint? He kept running away from the camera because there was a whistleblower in his administration that just came out saying, "Oh, by the way, it's done nothing. It's done zero. And while it's done zero for the planet, the people of Washington State, especially middle income wage earners, are taking it on the chin who can't afford
Exactly.
this carbon tax, right? So they're punishing people for something that's not working. And
Right.
that's where we get back to this black or white, A or B choice. It should not be that. And if we're going to
Right.
move into alternative energies as a piece of the energy pie, Stu, we do that deliberately. We do that with a plan. We do that gradually, because there is a transition that can work for everybody if that's what we're going to end up doing way downstream. But what doesn't work is a hard stop. And that's what certain leaders like Governor Inslee in Washington State have mandated, and it's hurting.
We're going to have a poll here just in case anybody's watching. And let's take a look here. Who do you think will win? Oh, I can't even spell right. My keyboard stuck. So who will win a Biden-Trump debate? Who do you think is going to win? So anybody watching, fill in a note, let us know, and we'll give us your comments while we're chit-chatting here on that.
Well, that debate's going to be amazing. June 27th, circle that on the calendar. The funniest thing, I think the funniest thing still is what the president, I keep saying the president, the former president said to the now president and his team. He said,
Well,
look,
that's a whole other conspiracy theory.
he said, Donald Trump said, look, I'm looking forward to the debate. Let's have a 2-hour debate and both of us will stand during the full 2 hours, right? And I'm thinking that is so Donald Trump. That is so
Oh,
vintage.
yeah, and he could do it.
Yes. But as I think I said earlier, this isn't a studio. It's not before an audience. So you have two questioners who, by the way,
Right.
are not big fans of Donald Trump from CNN.
Right.
And so it's the two of them, the president and the former president. And
Right.
the dynamics could be a little different there. It just is, because Donald Trump feeds off the energy of others.
Right.
I think that the president, Joe Biden, maybe is more comfortable in a studio, right, feeding off himself one-on-one in more of a fireside chat kind of environment. It'll be very interesting to see if that at all impacts any perception of winners and losers that night.
And this is a real question. I mean, what do you think about the demand of him having him drug tested? Because the allegations of him, how he was fired up during one of the last speeches was incredible.
You guys gotta love it, right? Because that's the kind of thing you laugh at, right? And then you say, well, wait a minute. He was kind of amped up, right? Beyond normal. What was going on there? No, you have to give Joe Biden some credit. I mean, there are moments like the State of the Union that he just, he seemed to be kind of on a higher energy level, which is important, because probably the biggest question of the night was that. Does he have it in him physically to go another 4 years? I think he's trying to answer that. Unfortunately for him, I thought that was one of the many, many, many missed opportunities to make maybe a fundamental difference in impacting his fortunes in the 24 race. I really do.
Yeah, that is an outstanding point. What do you see coming around the corner? Because we had the Summer of Love 2.0. Is this going to be the Summer of Love where we had all the destruction going on with the BLM riots, and we're going to have these other? Or what are we going to see this summer? What is in your crystal ball?
Well, first we have 2 political conventions. That should be on everyone's crystal ball. And unbelievably, you know how funny it is that history repeats itself. And we like to think that that's because people don't learn from history. There are probably other explanations, but the Democrats have chosen Chicago to go to for their convention, right? And I remember I was around when they had the 68 convention, not at the convention. I was young. And I just remember the horror of seeing the television coming from Chicago that day. And now you've got and maybe it will be different by the summer, but with all the protests around the country, principally
Right.
about the situation in the Middle East, you got to believe that there's going to be disturbances in and around that Chicago convention. And of
Right.
course, what's the media going to do? They're going to bring back the old clips from 1968 and Mayor Daley and et cetera. And they'll say, well, it isn't quite that, but here we go again. Right.
Oh my goodness.
So I think that's one part. That's one thing to look forward to. Hopefully, on an entertainment front, we're all going to find that America does well in the Paris Olympics, not to be underestimated. Right, right in the smack dab middle of the summer. Right, uh, maybe that will give us some sense of temporary relief. From the day-to-day focus we've all had on what's going on with America and the rest of the world.
Well, I, for one, being an energy guy, when Donald Trump got out of the Paris Accords, speaking of Paris, got out of the Paris Accords and would save us trillions upon trillions of dollars, I'm kind of hoping we stay out of Paris.
It was not a good verdict coming out of Paris when it came to the energy industry. It was, but very predictable, right? Still, unfortunately, and I'm you see there are comparisons being made to how are we measuring up to the commitments that were made in Paris, and the answer is not very, very, very well. And part of the reason for that, the answer to, America is really beyond among all nations on earth, is one of the leaders on the planet when it comes to energy efficiency, doing things right in the energy sector, as opposed to most other nations on earth. And yet, it seems like the burden is on us to keep doing what the other parts of the world are not doing, China being one of them, of course. And that's beyond just not fair. That's not helping achieve anything that was discussed at the Paris meeting. So
I don't get it, and this is just being too media energy folk talking here. China we have reduced our CO2 emissions by 22% last year, according to the Biden administration's EIA report that just came out. China has increased theirs 220% last year because of there's 4,000 coal plants around the world that are in process, either in process or being built around the world. And so when you take a look at coal, they're putting everything they can out. They're putting in wind, they're putting in solar, they're putting in nuclear, they're putting in everything they possibly can.
Right.
But they're still polluting like you wouldn't believe. And we're buying all the components from them that they're making with coal, and then we're trying to stuff those into our grid. I'm not following the science here.
You can't write that kind of material and with a straight face without saying, wait a minute, that's like crazy, right? But it's true. It's true. And I don't know, if we were around that proverbial table with leaders in China, what we would insist on and how we would insist on it, that in terms of energy and the way they're approaching that. Is it either you do this or we start to really turn the screws, or is it we're going to stop doing it ourselves? I like the fact that we think Americans generally, Stu, find the right thing to do. They kind of understand what the right thing to do, and they pursue that, right? Even if we're not all on board, even if we don't agree with a certain approach, generally we feel similarly motivated. But China and other nations around the world are not motivated that way. Many of them are motivated by leaders or leaders within parties that want to stay in power. Vladimir Putin being a good example of that in Russia. The whole situation in China, North Korea, Kim Jong crazy, I call him. He's all these leaders that are
Rocket Man, as our former president called him.
right, but they're on an agenda for themselves, and I think America has always tried, especially not without stumbling, but we tried to find agendas that are for the common good. And when it comes to energy, I think we've done actually a very good job. And most of the leaders in the energy industry have truly been leaders in keeping us moving forward. And I don't think that they get the credit for that.
If you were at an executive table with Senator Cruz, what would you ask him?
About Beyond how big are you going to win your reelection by? Uh, uh, Senator Cruz is one of the smartest people in Washington. I don't, and it's not by his own
Oh,
standards. He just is. Um, I,
he was brilliant when I saw him. I'm going to say obliterate Secretary Blinken the other day.
oh yeah, and it's just and
Unbelievable.
he did it intellectually. It wasn't mean spirited. It was just
It was factual.
it's factual. And there's a lot of intellectual dishonesty, of course, in the process. And Ted Cruz is one of those people that
Yep.
does not suffer fools gladly when it comes to that. He just won't do that.
No.
I'm hoping that one of the things that Senator Cruz will lead. We had one of the biggest issues, the problems, challenges, et cetera, in this country is
Right.
what's happening on the southern border. You know, he represents not just America, but also the state of Texas. I think that what the governor is doing down there, to a large extent, is really right on. You know, kind of drawing the line, proverbial line, saying, "Yeah, we've had enough." I was hopeful that by now the federal government would follow suit. They have not. Maybe it will take a change of administration to
At
get
least the
there.
Supreme Court stood up with Texas.
But Ted Cruz can be a big leader in that, and I think if
Yeah.
we fix that, there's still a sense, I think, in the country of loss of control. You know, you saw
Right.
that over in Europe with Brexit. Brexit passed because people thought things were spiraling out of control with leadership coming from the EU. And I
Right.
think in similar fashion, I think Americans want to get control again of something, right? And
Right.
immigration issue on the southern border is a thing that most feeds the fear of loss of control. If you start to fix that, I think a lot of other things start to square away, but we haven't done anything meaningful to do that. And we've got to do that without apology as opposed to clarity.
Well said. I need to hang with you more often. I'll tell you, you know, when you sit back and we take a look at Europe, the EU, things happen in Europe and then they kind of filter over to the US in an orderly, sometimes not orderly fashion. And we're seeing a major shift to the right in the EU right now. And the left wing New Green Deal folks, their heads are exploding. It's just going nuts.
Yep.
And so as we see this ground swelling coming this way, and I love the way that it's being portrayed as the far right, when the far right used to be a Democrat. I used to work and help legislation years ago with Democrats and Republicans in writing legislation. And I guarantee you, you could not tell a difference between a Democrat and a Republican back then because they were Americans.
Yep.
And we didn't care if you were a Republican or a Democrat. I'd like to get back to that.
Well, I spent a number of years early in my career in Oklahoma. I know that's close and near and dear to your heart. And those were back in the days where Republicans were like Democrats,
What did you in
Democrats were
Stillwater?
like Republicans. It was in Oklahoma City.
Oh, Oklahoma City. I thought you were in Stillwater.
My first campaign I ever was a part of as a deputy press secretary was for Ron Schatz. And Ron
Nice.
Schatz ran for governor this one year against George Nye, the long time at that point lieutenant governor. And George Nye was kind of a centrist, just slightly left of center, maybe
Right.
Democrat. Ron was a right of center Republican, who, of course, for those that remember that at all, Ron Schatz was a former All-America halfback for the Sooners. So we started with 45% of the vote, right? We only got to 49. We only picked up 4 more points. But those were the days when leaders on both sides of the aisle in Oklahoma, they could deal with each other. They could talk to each other. And I think the people in the state really reacted to that in a big way, in a good way. But since then, even in Oklahoma and many other states, I think there's become more of a political schism between right and left. And given the choice, of course, people in Oklahoma and other states have gone one way, and it has been in the direction of Joe Biden's party.
You know, I'll never. I was having lunch with Governor Nye and a few of the other folks, and I made some jokes that were absolutely hilarious. In fact, Neil Bush was there, and he absolutely came apart, and he even introduced me around and everything else because that was the funniest joke he ever said. When we're not on the air, I'll tll you the joke, and it was one of my better ones.
Well, you remember the days that David Boren. They've had some very interesting leaders
Yes.
that really moved the needle. The nice thing is they did stuff.
Yes.
They weren't flapping their jaws. They were moving into action. And I think people in Oklahoma and across the country today would say
Yep.
we need more of that.
It's like Representative Dutchendorf. Representative Dutchendorf, his brother was my dad's wingman in the B-58 program, which was the B-58 Hustler, which was the fastest bomber ever made. And my dad sat on the runway, ready to go bomb Russia, for 15 years in the Cold War. And John Denver was his son. So I sat at the bomb alert facility with John Denver, his nephew, and all he would do was play that damn guitar, and we would try to play football. And look where that got, of course, he's,
Well, way back when, Stu, at an earlier age, sans beard, whatever else, some people thought I looked like John Denver, and I used to come in and out of BWI Airport to do a lot of the political work around the country. And someone who was in charge of the parking lot finally said, he kept looking at me. He said, "Oh, you're that John Denver guy." I said, No, I'm Adam Denver. I'm his brother. And so we started a relationship that went on for a year or two. Every time
your maiden name or your real name.
Yeah, and he wanted to know how's John doing and any songs he's working on. We had even though it was a relationship built on a piece of larceny, it was a great time. And John Denver, was one of those people that made you feel good about the country.
I love John because I got to see him at Pebble Beach right before he died. And I walked up and hugged him, and everybody else around the room, "Why are you hugging John Denver?" And I was like, because I used to try to beg him to go play football. And it was really pretty funny that we would laugh about the old days of sitting on an alert facility. And then years later, to get to work with his Democrat dad, his uncle. Politics should not be to political system. It should be Americans fixing energy poverty for Americans.
Right. And allowing for different perspectives to get there. That's good. That's a strength. That's not a weakness. That's a strength of ours. And for some reason, if someone's not 100% on your page, the attitude today, more often than not, especially in politics too, is people turn their back.
Adam, as a podcast host, how do you handle this when somebody says something incredibly stupid? I have a hard time because I'm the one saying stupid things most of the time.
I'd like to say that our show, 13th and Park, it was predicated on one idea.
What's that?
Bringing information to the table. Bring information to the table and let people decide what to do with it, right? Don't sit there and spend 30 minutes proselytizing based on opinion. Say, here's what we know, and then bring on guests who really know what they're talking about on certain subject areas. Try to get that information on the table. Thank them profusely for providing that information, and then sit back and watch the reaction, as opposed to, let me just tell you what Sue just said to all of us, right?
Yep.
There is good and there is bad, and this is the good and this is the bad. No, stop. This is what we see in media today. They can't help themselves. They want to be the referee, judge, jury, and executioner, right?
Yep.
On everything, as opposed to be the facilitator of information that people are not getting, and then just let it happen.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. Well, that would be great. We all, we grew up in the times of the titans in the industry, Walter Cronkite et al. And now we're left with, what Spiro Agnew would have referred to as the nattering nabobs of negativity.
Wow. I'm going to use that one if you don't mind, but I'm going to give you credit for it.
Give Spiro Agnew credit for that.
Yeah.
One of his best.
John Denver had a wonderful soundtrack on one of his albums, and he said, "This is the Ballad of Spirit Agnew." And it just went right to the next song. It was pretty funny.
One thing Agnew did that he gets no credit for, because what he did at the end of his career brought a lot of discredit. When the riots happened, when assassination, Martin Luther King, and the cities in the East were like all blowing up, Agnew worked with the Black community, especially in Baltimore City, and really helped keep the lid on things. And he gets almost no credit for that. He didn't do that for effect or for headlines. He did that because he understood this could lead to something really bad for everyone. And it's funny how history treats people. I think of my good friend Rudy Giuliani,
Yep.
who unfortunately has had better times. I worked with Rudy in New York way back when.
Oh, cool.
It was brilliant. This was before 9/11, and what he did with that city, and what he did for
Wow.
that city, and then what he did for America, and holding us together when those planes went into the World Trade Center. That was phenomenal leadership.
Wow.
He won't be remembered for that. He's going to be
No,
remembered for
it-
Act 85 as opposed to the first 80 acts of his career, and that's unfortunate.
oh no. And I just truly appreciate you, Adam, and everything else. And I look forward to more conversations in the future, and hope to have you back. And if there's anything that we could ever do for you, please tell folks what's important to you. What do you see coming around the corner in this last little bit here?
Well, what I see is we're going to get through an election, right? I see that actually there's a chance with the advent of different thinking in Washington that we
Yep.
actually can reinforce our economy again. We can actually start to fix the problem on our southern border. We can
That's
have
right.
a more consistent foreign policy abroad. Uh, peace through strength. I'm a big believer in the Reagan
Right.
doctrine. That kind of thing becomes possible, I think, if we have certain changes in Washington. But at the very least, I hope the American people stand forth and say this is what we want, and they draw their own line moving forward that leaders will follow.
You know what I would love to have happen is I want to talk to, if you're out there, you're an energy expert or you're a human. I don't care about Democrat, Republican. I don't care about. I've talked to I've had a lot of great conversations with Republicans. Democrats don't like me too often, but it's more. If you're a human and you want to solve problems, I want to talk to you. So that's my outlook.
I'm right by your side, Stu. Let's do this again soon.
I'll talk to you soon. Hey, we'll see you soon.
Take care.